There is a kind of weight that has no shape. You cannot see it. You cannot measure it. But if you have ever carried something unsaid, a thank you that never quite made it out of your chest, a love that stayed quietly folded inside you, an apology that lived only in the back of your mind, then you already know what I am talking about. It was sometime in the late 1970s. Sammy Davis Jr. was sitting in a dressing room, somewhere between Las Vegas and a sold-out theater. It barely mattered anymore which city. The mirror in front of him was ringed with lights, the kind that made everyone look more alive than they felt. He was alone. The crowd had gone. The laughter had faded. The applause, the thing that had carried him through so much of his life, was now just an echo in an empty corridor. And in that quiet, he held a pen. Just a pen. He had been meaning to write something. To someone. He was not sure anymore which someone came first. Sammy Davis Jr. had spent his entire life in motion. He had been performing since he was 3 years old. 3 years old, tap dancing in vaudeville shows alongside his father and his uncle. He had grown up on buses, in dressing rooms, in places that would not allow him through the front door, even as they paid him to stand on their stage. He had faced hatred with a smile so polished that most people never saw the cost of it. He had climbed to a place that seemed, from the outside, like everything. The Rat Pack, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Vegas headliner, Broadway, Hollywood, television. Sammy Davis Jr. had broken through walls that were not supposed to move. He had done it with extraordinary talent, yes, but also with a kind of relentless, exhausting drive. The kind of drive that does not pause to look sideways. The kind of drive that keeps moving because stopping feels dangerous. And along the way, because this is what happens when we are moving very fast, there were people. People who helped him. People who believed in him before it was safe to. People who stood by him through the lawsuits, the threats, the years when being black in a tuxedo on a Las Vegas stage meant staying in a different part of town from your white co-stars. People he had not always stopped long enough to thank. There was his father, Sammy Davis Sr., a man who had carried his son through the earliest years of that life, literally and figuratively. Who had pushed him forward, protected him, taught him how to survive rooms that wanted him to disappear. Their relationship was not simple. Fathers and sons rarely are, especially when one of them has been both a parent and a manager and a companion through a childhood that did not look like anyone else's. They loved each other. That was never the question. But between love and the full saying of it, there can be so much distance. There were the musicians who had stayed late, who had played the same song 37 times until it was right, who had never been mentioned by name in the interviews. There were the black performers who had opened doors and then watched Sammy walk through them into rooms they themselves were still not welcome in. There were the Jewish community who had embraced him after his conversion in 1954, a faith he held genuinely, privately, for the rest of his life, who had offered him a sense of belonging that he never quite said out loud how much it meant. And there were the people he had hurt. Not with cruelty. Sammy was not a cruel man. But with absence. With the particular kind of neglect that belongs to people who are never quite present because the next show, the next city, the next performance is always pulling them forward. His marriages, his children, The friendships that had thinned because he had not called, not visited, not stopped. He was the life of every room he entered, but there were people who needed him not as an entertainer, just as a person, just as a man who showed up. In his later years, and Sammy Davis Jr. died in 1990 at 64, taken by throat cancer, he spoke more openly about what he wished he had done differently. Not the career, not the choices that had gotten him there, but the conversations. The ones that had never happened. The ones he had meant to have after this tour, after this film, after this Las Vegas run. After. Always after. And here is what he understood, quietly, in those dressing rooms and hotel rooms, and the long silences that began to find him more and more in his final decade. That the words you do not say do not disappear. They just stay inside you. And they are not peaceful there. They are not patient. They press against you in the small hours. They surface on quiet afternoons when you are not performing for anyone. They find you. The unsaid thank you. The unmailed letter. The phone call that never happened. The moment you stood in front of someone you loved and did not say the full and real thing because it felt like too much, or the timing was off, or you were afraid of what would happen if you let it out. Sammy knew all of that. He understood, in a way that only time teaches, that being the most celebrated person in the room had done nothing to ease that specific ache. Maybe you felt this too. Not on a stage, not in front of a crowd, but in an ordinary afternoon, standing in your kitchen, or sitting in your car, or lying quietly in the dark before sleep comes, and thinking of someone. Someone you have not called in too long. Someone you meant to write to. Someone you have been grateful for, deeply and genuinely grateful for, and yet somehow the full weight of that gratitude never made it all the way out into words they could actually hear. Or perhaps it is the other kind. Something that happened between you and another person. A misunderstanding that hardened into distance. Words that were said in a moment you have regretted since. A silence that grew so long it began to feel like a wall. And now you are not sure if the door is even still there. Or maybe, and this is the one that is hardest to say, maybe there is someone you love who does not know, not fully, not in the way you feel it on the inside. Because love is one of those things we assume is understood. We assume the people closest to us can see it, can feel it, can read it off us like a signal. And sometimes they can. But sometimes they need to hear it. In words. In your voice. That is what Sammy was holding in that quiet room with the pen in his hand. Not a regret about fame, not a wish for different choices. Something smaller and more human than that. Something most of us are carrying too. Here is what I want to say to you now, gently, the way a good friend would say it. The words you have been holding, the thanks, the acknowledgement, the love that has not been said out loud, they deserve to be spoken. Not because it will change the past, not because it will fix everything or make things simple or guarantee that the other person responds the way you hope, but because those words belong to them. You have been carrying something that was always meant to be given away. Think of someone, just one person right now. Someone who helped you when you needed it. Someone who believed in you when you were not sure you believed in yourself. Someone who showed up quietly, consistently, without asking for recognition. And you have never quite put into words what that meant to you. Or think of someone you love, someone who is still here, who is perhaps a phone call away, or a short drive, or simply in the next room. And think about the last time you told them, plainly, directly, with nothing in the way of it, what they mean to you. When was that? How long ago? We tell ourselves it is understood. We tell ourselves they already know. And maybe they do, in the way that background music is known, always there, never really heard. But there is something that happens when you say it, something that does not happen any other way. The person hearing it feels seen, and the person saying it feels lighter. Sammy Davis Jr. carried so much, talent that could fill any room, pain that he hid behind a smile for decades, a life story that was genuinely extraordinary. And at the end of it, what pressed on him were not the performances he had given, but the conversations he had not. You do not have to wait. That is the thing Sammy understood, too late, and then understood again when time still allowed a few of those words to be spoken. You do not have to wait for the right moment. You do not have to wait until it feels easy, or until the other person asks, or until you have worked out exactly the right way to say it. The right moment is not coming on its own. You have to make it. A phone call, a letter, a sentence spoken quietly across a table. It does not need to be grand. It does not need to be long. It just needs to be real. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow morning, but soon, while there is still time to say it, while they are still here to hear it. Because the weight of the unsaid does not grow lighter with time, but the moment you finally speak, something in you begins to rest. Sammy picked up the pen that night. I like to think he wrote something. I like to think he made the call. You can too, whenever you are ready. And if not tonight, then let tonight at least be the night you decided. The words are already in you. They have been there a long time. It's time to let them out.